Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
Welcome into another playoff edition of Daily Faceoff Live, brought to you by Bet365, our sports betting partner just in time for the 2024 playoffs. We'll be here with Bet365 to give you all the news, analysis, lines, and betting options for the playoffs until one team is left standing at the end of June. Tyler Yaremchuk, Frank Seravalli, streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, where we're looking for your inbox questions. Frank, how was your off day in Vancouver?
Off day? What's an off day?
No, I know.
It's just a non-game day.
Non-game day.
That's what we go back and forth on.
Yeah.
It's like there's so much to do, so many, things to check in on, people to talk to, and not only that, but there's coaching searches going on around the league. There's teams starting to evaluate their rosters. There's talking to Kevin Adams today on Frankly Speaking about the Buffalo Sabres. There's a million things happening in the hockey world.
There is a lot going on. We're going to talk a little Oilers Canucks. We're going to talk Stars Avs later on with Brien Rea in our big segment. But let's start with a non-playoff team, one of the teams conducting a coaching search. Frank, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs. Their brass spoke today in Toronto. It was Keith Pelly, Brendan Shanahan, and Brad Treliving. A handful of things to take away from this one. The one that's kind of doing the rounds right now, in years past, they've doubled down, committed to the core four. They didn't really do that today.
Is anyone shocked?
I mean, that's what they should have done. Yes.
Brendan Shanahan said point blank, we've seen enough patterns and trends here. And actually, Gav, we can roll that clip now. This to me kind of encapsulates, without even being asked about the core, of what the Toronto Maple Leafs are thinking.
Sheldon. I also respected the fact that Sheldon took on a lot of the responsibility for the lack of results in the playoffs. I respect that. However, the reality of the situation is the ultimate responsibility is on me. The accountability is on me. Our playoff results have not been good enough. That's on me. The results that we've had in the playoffs, our players know, we know, I know, they're unacceptable. They're unacceptable to our fans, and they're unacceptable to all those that support the Toronto Maple Leafs. We do an analysis at the end of every season. We look at our team and we look forward and we look for ways to be better. And we do that every year. In the past, I believe that there are times where you talk about patience. and I still believe that there are times where patience is the suitable call. However, when you see patterns persist and the results don't change, you have to adjust the way that you think about things. We will look at everything this summer, and we will consider everything this summer. All with the intention of the one thing that we are here for, which is to make the Maple Leafs better and to win.
So they will look at anything, Frank, this summer. I thought another interesting quote came from Brad Treliving, who said we need to find a way to do the hard, unsexy things longer.
I don't get that.
And they're not related to skills. So for me, I don't get that either, because you went and got Ryan Reeves and committed money to Ryan Reeves. You went and got Max Domi and Tyler Bertuzzi, and it was like...
That's all the additions that Kyle Dubas made the previous deadline, too.
Yeah.
The issue isn't tough, hard, whatever, hard-nosed hockey. It's not killing penalties. It's scoring.
They lost that game to the Bruins because they couldn't score more than one goal.
They lost that series to the Bruins.
If they could have scored 3+ goals in a handful of games like their offense should have been capable of, they win. It had nothing to do with Ryan Reeves or any of that crap.
But then, so someone is probably listening to that saying, so why would they trade Mitch Marner? And it's because you might be able to get 3 players for Mitch Marner's pay that can score goals and aren't afraid when it comes to the playoffs.
Yeah,
that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, when I see that comment from Brad Treliving, I think it's got to be applied to the big guns. And I think it's kind of directed maybe even at one guy. So
Well, I think it's more than one guy because you still have one more year of John
you're right.
Tavares.
Yeah.
And look, Austin Matthews, they revealed today, dealing with a head injury during the last few games of the series before being cleared for game 7. The migraines we knew about from William Nylander, maybe also some unlucky timing in terms of those two injuries, but nonetheless, like, this is a team that their biggest failure is in scoring. 13 of their last 14 playoff games, 2 goals or fewer. It's not being harder. They still need to improve. That's the scariest part is through all of that, we still know that even if they were able to get past the Bruins, their defense core is not a Stanley Cup caliber contending core, defense core. And that's to say nothing of the giant question marks that they have in net.
I was going to make this a buy or sell question on the DFO rundown the other day, but I'll throw it to you now. If they do go down the path of moving one of the big 4 pieces, you mentioned, you could get 3 players with that money who can contribute to your lineup. Do you think they go that route, the quantity over quality, or do you think there's a chance that the Leafs have a new $8 million plus forward at the start of next season by the time the dust settles?
Well, if it's 8, then it would be 2 new players.
Yeah, you're right.
That's the thing.
3, yeah.
And
but do you think they go that route of trying to get a big piece to replace whoever they end up moving on from?
That's what I would try and do.
Yeah.
But I'm not the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I look at it and I say, look at the teams that are having success in the playoffs. The Dallas Stars had 8 20-goal scorers. They come at you in waves. The Colorado Avalanche are 4 lines deep. The Edmonton Oilers have plenty of depth. They're 6 legitimate top 6 forwards deep.
Mm-hmm.
The Toronto Maple Leafs, they have 4, but their struggle is getting to the 6. And how much have we talked about over the years the fact that Edmonton was 2 players short? The fact that, but yet no one has really raised that question, because you can't even raise the question in Toronto because they don't have the cap space to do it with the contracts that they handed out to those players.
Yeah. Oh, man, going to be an interesting summer. The Leafs, as you'd expect, will be in the headlines plenty. But let's zero back into the playoff talk, Frank, and start with one of the results from last night. I mean, Canes, Rangers, Carolina back on home ice after losing to at MSG. Frank, you're never in trouble till you lose on home ice. The Canes are in trouble. And for a moment there, Svechnikov scores 96 seconds to go in the game. And I'm thinking, that's going to be that little moment. The Canes are going to make this a long series. We're going to look back at that Svechnikov goal and go, damn, if that didn't go in, this series would have been over. Instead, it's Artemi Panarin who sends the crowd home quiet in Carolina with the OT winner. And
if it wasn't that one, by the way, it would have been the game tying goal to send it to overtime. And you say,
yeah,
okay, now they're going to be on their way. I mean, Gav, pull up the box score again. 47 shots on goal. Are you kidding? At what point? Yes. So let me say this about the overall aspect of the series. And I've brought this up before on the show. What Tom Dundon said to me on Frankly Speaking, the way that he framed the Stanley Cup playoffs as 4 rounds of 7 individual coin flips. Look at the way these first 3 games have played out. Has there been a more razor thin margin to have one team with a 3-0 lopsided series scoreboard lead? Game 2 went to double OT. Game 1, they had a chance to tie late, and it was a special teams battle. And game 3 goes to OT. I mean, that is as close as it gets. And then at a certain point, part of what I have to stop myself and ask is, we're talking so much about the Canes. How about what the New York Rangers are doing?
They've won 7 games in a row.
They haven't lost yet in the postseason. They had a sweep plus 3 wins. And Igor Shesterkin, by the way, nearly a second straight game with 50 saves. I mean, the numbers are undeniable. He's been lights out these playoffs. And maybe it's time for everyone else around the league to put some respect to the New York Rangers, who were the best regular season team in the league, yet entered this series on Bet365 as sizable underdogs to the Canes.
It is wild. 3-0 for the Rangers. Let's go and look at what's coming up tonight, Frank. And again, we'll talk Stars Avs in 2 minutes here with Brien Rea. But tonight, Florida and Boston tied 1-1. This thing is going back to Boston for game 3. And it's been 2 blowouts so far, Frank. It got real spicy at the end. Boston so
Sign
far.
me up.
Boston so far in these playoffs has played tight games on home ice. I really do think things are going to tighten up. Part of it will be goaltending. I believe in that. But also, I just think there's now this disdain. I think they kind of got the crap out of the way in terms of their playing games 1 and 2, each side had their stinker, I think we're going to have a tight series from this point on.
Maybe.
So you're still a little bit leaning on the maybe Florida can get the old gentleman sweep in?
I think Florida's a significantly better team. So I do think that it's not necessarily going to be lopsided, because I think the Bruins have shown they have a ton of fight. And quite literally, when, one of their star players drops the gloves like he did in David Pastrnak. But for me, I think Florida just overwhelms you. I think their size, their speed, their physicality, and then the depth factor that Florida has that I think is really special. That said, all the hockey stuff is interesting. The series being tied, great. Sure, the drama's awesome, but I just really want to see how spicy it gets tonight. I mean, we talked about this yesterday. This reminds me of Stanley Cup playoffs as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Red Wings, Avs, like that to me is like the end all be all in terms of what a rivalry should look and feel like. And these teams that, maybe haven't had the sort of playoff convergence of a Leafs Bruins, this can ratchet to another level really quite quickly. And I love what we saw in the first 2 games of this series to just say, hey, both these teams are proud. They've both put a stake in the ground in a game. But now, as Matthew Tkachuk said yesterday, we're not here to play patty cake. I'm here to throw punches.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. One thing I wonder, if Boston's able to get to him again tonight, if you're Florida, maybe let's run down the hypothetical. Bobrovsky doesn't have the best game. Any chance you think Florida looks okay? Carolina made the goaling change. Maybe you could say it didn't work, but I think
it worked fine.
Yeah, Kachekov was fine. Florida's got a backup there who led the NHL in save percentage and goals against average, and Anthony Stolarz this season. Do you think there's a little bit? Maybe they'd give no. It's not going to be one of those situations.
Not really. Bobrovsky he not only has the pedigree, but also has the playoff experience with this team.
Yeah, you're right.
I think there's a massive drop off between Sergei Bobrovsky and Anthony Stolarz. With all due respect to the numbers he had this year, it is like going from number 7 in the league to 55. That's a huge drop.
Yeah. Where we are, Frank, out in Vancouver, it is game 2, Oilers and Canucks tonight. I think if you're Vancouver, you're sitting there going, boy, we got him in game 1. That building, again, should be rocking, hopefully, from the jump tonight. If you're Edmonton, there's pressure on you in this one. I know, again, you're never in trouble till you lose on home ice, but you look at that Carolina Rangers series and you go, God, we didn't steal one of the 2 on the road. Carolina comes back home and then just you don't get a bounce, you lose, and all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, this series is almost over. There is legitimate pressure on the Edmonton Oilers to bounce back tonight. Legitimate pressure on number 97 as well.
I'm going to say false.
Really?
To both those things.
I think if it's 2-0, there's just you leave it.
I think the Oilers are feeling like I was in that locker room after the game, and I've seen teams after getting absolutely stunned in a playoff game, blowing a 3-goal lead, and it was like nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
If they do go down 2-0 to the Vancouver Canucks, I don't think they're going home to Edmonton shaking in their boots.
Really?
I really don't. And that said, it doesn't mean you come in and not have urgency or take them lightly. No one's suggesting that at all. It's just that I think they have this confidence about them that they're going to be in fine shape. And they didn't really play well and still had a 4-1 lead.
Yeah,
that's kind of...
They got 1 power play.
Yeah, the Canucks averaged 3.8 penalties per game this year. To think that they're going to be 75% below their season average every game in this series, it's really unlikely. And more than that, I just think Connor McDavid not having a shot on goal in a playoff game, that's never happened before. This is a guy that's been averaging 1.62 points per game in the playoffs in his career. Is 1.6 points per game, is he not going to get a shot in game 2? I'm sorry, I don't think they're feeling any pressure.
Okay.
And more than that, it's kind of amazing how that one game has flipped this in, the perspective in Vancouver's favor, because I was sitting there late second period going, Canucks are down 4-1. If they don't win game 2 on home ice, this series is over. There's no chance that the Canucks are beating the Oilers 4 times in 5 games to win the series if they were to go down 0-2. Now the perspective has changed. All of a sudden it's like, hey, how close is Demko? Can we, make this a long series? We'll find out tonight.
Leon Draisaitl obviously left the game for a little bit, returned, wasn't on the ice for the Oilers yesterday. I was on with Sakaris and Price yesterday, and they asked from an Oilers perspective, how concerned are you about this lingering Draisaitl issue? And for me, it's the concern level isn't that high from an Oilers perspective, because think about the BOA a couple of years ago. We know what Leon Draisaitl is.
Did on one leg.
On one leg. Like, we know what he's willing to play through and also how effective he can be when playing through it. I don't have a ton of concern about 29.
I'll present a different perspective. I think the Oilers are concerned. And they said yesterday, day to day, 24 hours prior to that, at the end of game 1, Chris Knobloch said cramping and equipment issue. I don't know what the equipment issue is, and we joked about this yesterday, where his pants not right. I mean, look at me. I walk around, my pants are never right. They're always too tight. But the joke is serious in the sense that I think the Oilers woke up yesterday and were really surprised to see that he was in worse shape than they thought he would be. And I think he's going to play in game 2, but I think that it was more serious than they thought it was.
One thing to maybe watch for, and they've done it in the past when Draisaitl isn't at 100%, and even in the regular season when McDavid isn't at 100%, they team them up, put them on the same line, and try to just kind of go supernova. So if one of them's at 80%, it kind of,
The old break glass in case of emergency.
Yep. Yeah. Going nuclear. Let's keep moving along, and let's get to our big segment for the day. It's the All 32 with Brien Rea. The All 32 is powered by Booster Juice. Visit the location today to refuel, refresh, or re-energize, or download their new Booster Rewards app to earn, order, and enjoy. Excited to welcome Brien Rea into the show from Bally Sports Southwest. Appreciate the time, Brien. Let's dig in to this matchup between the Stars and Avalanche. And oh man, it felt like almost deja vu for a little bit for the Stars in game 2. They get up. The Avs bring it nice and close, but they were able to finish the job. What were the differences in how the Stars played from game 1 to game 2?
Well, it felt like deja vu for everybody watching that game. For those of us that have covered the team locally, it was deja vu times 4, because this also happened twice in the regular season, where Colorado came into American Airlines Center. The Stars opened up a 3-goal lead, and they found a way to lose the game. So when it happened in game 1, that was the 3rd time this season that's occurred. And last night, you do have to wonder, is this going to happen for a 4th time? Obviously, it didn't for the Dallas Stars. I think getting the 4th goal was huge, and Tyler Seguin bearing the shorthanded tally. I do feel like Dallas maintained their pace and maintained their intensity much better through period 2. It felt like in game 1, period 1, Dallas came out flying. Period 2 and 3, Colorado completely flipped the script. I thought Dallas was the better team in overtime in game 1, but Miles Wood put on the afterburners and got the timely goal that was needed. I thought Dallas maintained their pace of play much better in game 2, and they were able to hold off that push. I also think the other aspect, Dallas finally got some penalty kills. And Peter DeBoer mentioned this at morning skate before game 2. You're going to take penalties against the Colorado Avalanche. They're just too good. They possess the puck too well. There's too much pace. But can you take a minimum number of penalties? And Dallas only took 2 in game 1, but the Avalanche buried both of those power play goals, and that's what got them back into the game. Dallas finally got some kills in game 2. Colorado, as much as they're able to load up that power play, they could not get themselves back into the game at the same pace that they did in game 1 without those power play goals. I think that massively came up huge in the long run for Dallas to hold on and eventually get the empty netter.
Yeah, I totally agree with you in the sense that what you're saying is they maintained their intensity, and you could tell that they kept pushing. I'm curious what you thought in terms of how they maintained their composure, because when you have this happen to you 3 times and potentially on your way to a 4th, maybe you get rattled a little bit. Did you see any of that in game 2 against the Avs?
No, I didn't. And I think if you look at the big picture with the Dallas Stars, and this is one of those things where it's not a great trait, but it is a great trait to have. They were one of the best comeback teams in the NHL all season. Colorado was as well. But for the first half of the year, really leading up to the All-Star break, Dallas was a middle-of-the-pack team if you look at first periods. Goal differential was a big metric that we focused on our show locally, but they were middle of the pack. It was the second period where that number really flipped and they found whatever gear they needed to take control of hockey games. So they have had this slow starting characteristic going early on. And a lot of times they would fall behind in games and they would have to come back in the second or come back in the third and ultimately win it. So the getting rattled gene, they figured out a way to either eliminate that or manage it in the first half of the season. And after the All-Star break, they did do a better job of starting to get early control of hockey games. But they're a team that's used to playing from behind or used to playing in frantic situations where they almost have to go into a survival mode for a stretch just to get themselves recollected and get through that momentum shift. And you can even look at the standings. I mean, for the majority of the season, they didn't know if they were going to win the division or if they were going to finish third in the division because of what they were dealing with Colorado and Winnipeg on a nightly basis. So while they won the West, or they were the number one team in the West, and yes, they beat Vegas, this wasn't a comfortable push to the number one seed or a comfortable push to the second round. They've had to deal with some adversity or some uncomfortable scenarios from other teams over the course of the regular season. So I do think they do a very good job of managing emotions and maintaining an even keel. And if you look at the makeup of the roster, Joe Pavelski's that kind of player. Ryan Suter's that kind of player. Jamie Benn has turned into that kind of player. Duchesne as well. There's a heavy veteran presence, which usually manages those situations very well on teams. This is not the first time, and this won't be the last time, that they have to deal with a furious push from Colorado. They've managed it well for the most part, but we will see how it continues because it still felt very uncomfortable, I think, for anybody's taste in the first two games here.
Yeah, not really comfortable for anyone in Dallas, but certainly great theater for anyone watching around the league. When it comes to some of the vets and the veteran presence that you mentioned, Chris Tanev, give us a word on what he's meant to the team. And is this maybe the best trade deadline pickup that any team made in 2024?
Let's wait and see how the rest of the playoffs pay off here. And even they vote for the GM of the Year award after round two. But put it this way, he's in the running. He's absolutely a top three choice for the best trade deadline pickup. And if you just talk to Dallas players, he's fit like a glove. I think a lot of people identified him as the regular season was progressing as the perfect type of player that Dallas needed. The Stars had no problem scoring goals. They had no problem with depth offense. It was a matter of can they supplement a defensive unit that lost to the Vegas Golden Knights last season? And before the Tanev trade, they basically ran it back. This was the exact same unit. Jim Nill told us over the summer offseason that he wanted to give Thomas Harley and Niels Lundqvist opportunities for internal growth. Those were young players, and those are building block players. So he was not going to rush into anything. But I think as we saw the season roll along, Thomas Harley was making his growth spurts. Niels Lundqvist, the minutes are what they are in the playoffs. This is a thing that we've observed locally in Dallas for even before the playoffs began. But I think it was becoming more and more clear Dallas had a team that could make a run, but they needed a piece to get themselves over the hump because they knew they were going to have to go through Vegas, Colorado, Edmonton, Winnipeg, all these different teams. So a player like Chris Tanev, and the big thing I noticed, when you look at the teams that Dallas was going to have to go through, Mark Stone in Vegas, Rantanen and Nichushkin in Colorado, Evander Kane in Edmonton. These are all big, meaty, net front players that can take a very physical game on your D-core over the course of a 7-game series. And Chris Tanev is built to play that kind of game. Esa Lindell can do it. Yanni Hakanpää can do it. But to ask only 2 players to do it over the course of what would be 4 Stanley Cup playoff rounds if you go on this run, that's a lot. And now Dallas doesn't have Yanni Hakanpää right now. So adding Chris Tanev and that beef to that mix, I think, was a requirement for Dallas. And we are seeing the dividends pay off right now in what he's done. And I hadn't even considered putting him on the ice when McKinnon is there, just because of how good he is defending at 5-on-5. that's also a factor that I think has come into play through the first two games, and we'll see how that continues over the course of this series.
Brien Rea from Bally Sports Southwest. You can find him on Twitter at Brien Rea. Appreciate your time, man. Enjoy the rest of the series.
Appreciate it, guys. Good to talk to you.
Moving along to our daily Faceoff inbox question, which is brought to you by Douglas Mattress. Order yours today at douglas.ca/DFO. Every mattress order comes with a free comfort sleep bundle. That means you get 2 memory foam pillows with pillow protectors, 1 luxurious cotton sheet set, and 1 mattress protector free with any mattress order at douglas.ca/DFO. Frank, new episode of Frankly Speaking, going to drop at 1 o'clock here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. You had a chance to speak with Sabres GM Kevin Adams. Let's take a little sneak peek at that.
Reasons to be bullish on Buffalo. We've talked about many of them. One of our previous conversations, one of the big things that stood out to me was that you had said, look, I wasn't here for most of it. I can't wear the last 13 years and what that's been like for this fan base. As you now, it stretches one more season. You don't want to see it. No one wants to see that in Buffalo in terms of the playoff drought. Do you feel any more of it now as the longer it goes on? What's that process like when you're, desperately trying to get this team to where it should be?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I mean, I think it's one we can't hide from. I mean, I'm going into year 5 as general manager of this team. I think we've done a lot of really good things in terms of building up our prospect pipeline and setting this organization up for, sustainable success. And that's the stuff you probably heard me say 3-4 years ago, that we needed to really, have patience. And I know nobody wanted to hear that at the time, but I get it. Look, now we're at a point where I think we're evolving into the next phase where we need to go out there and we need to perform. We need to have expectations high. There needs to be urgency from me right through the organization that it's time to take a step forward. And I believe we have a team that can be a playoff team. And then once you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. So that'll be the expectation. Do I feel, what the people in this town and community feel? Of course. But do I let it take over or get in my head in terms of making decisions? No. We have a plan. We'll stick to it. But we also understand that now we're into this next phase and it's time for us to move forward and win hockey games.
Into the next phase, Frank, the pressure may be being turned up a little bit in
Definitely.
Buffalo. When you look at everything they'll maybe look to accomplish, what's number one? What's the most urgent task for Kevin Adams?
Youngest team in the league last year. Too young, too small, pushed around. What's odd about that is the Sabres have the youngest team in the NHL, and they had one of the oldest AHL teams. So they know that you need experience and vets to win at the AHL level. You have to get some of that at the NHL level. And I liked that he really gave their young players some room to grow. Like if you don't hold a spot open for JJ Peterka, he doesn't have a breakout season this year. And so that's important, but I think they needed a better mix of that, a better blend and balance to your point. I think they've got the back end to be really dangerous. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, he said that they're in the process of talking contract extension. Will it be long-term? Will it be midterm in length? The goalie situation is important. UPL, Devin Levi seems to kind of set you up for the next number of years.
Can be your Swayman Allmark.
But you also can't have a year that your leading scorers get 59 points total. Just 50 goals evaporated into the ether for the Sabres this year. I'm bullish on Buffalo. I mentioned it in there. That back end, when you add Bo and Byram to Dahlin and Power and Samuelson, man, it's going to be really good, but you need help. You got to find a way to better support the pieces that you have there. And maybe in some ways that's easier to do, to fill out the group than to acquire the difference makers, but they've still got their work cut out for them to make such a big jump.
Yeah. Let's move along to our daily bets for the day. It's brought to you by Bet365, the largest sports betting platform globally. You can sign up today. Use the promo code DAILY365 to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Frank, there's one play I like today, and it is on the Oilers and number 97 bouncing back. The same game parlay on Bet365 pays out +10. You need the Oilers money line, McDavid 2+ points, and McDavid 3+ shots on goal. Frank, I think 97 is going to have a bounce back. You don't keep them quiet back-to-back nights.
You're going out on a limb.
Going out on a limb.
Like it's
but it's a solid payout. And actually, what's funny about this one is I did something similar, but Bet365 offers the early payout if your team goes up by 3. So I actually ended up winning a couple of Oilers bets.
It's automatic, right?
It's automatic. So
Yeah.
I won a couple of Oilers bets, even though they ended up losing it. One of the many things I love about our friends at Bet365.
The beauticians at Bet365. I mean, you go up 3, like you should win. But I mean, we just talked about that. Like we almost had a third straight night last night where we had a 3-goal comeback.
Yeah. 3
nights in a row in the cup playoffs where, just no lead is safe.
Let's wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time for our friends at Wendy's. It takes hard work and determination to bring home the cup. Luckily, all you need to do to bring home some delicious Wendy's is download the Rewards app. You could be on your way to victory, and by victory, we mean free food. What are you waiting for? Download the Wendy's app today. Frank, as the Rangers finish it off in overtime, I thought this was a very cool moment with Blake Wheeler and his teammates. Jonathan Quick in the mix as well, but the injured Blake Wheeler banging on the glass for his boys in Carolina.
It's been some fascinating developments for the Rangers. We mentioned that they're undefeated. Blake Wheeler has been out since February 17th after suffering that gruesome leg injury. He's been back with the Rangers skating in practice in the non-contact jersey, getting closer. What happens if this team is able to make it to a conference final or cup final? Seems like the conference final is pretty likely now, up 3-0. They also had Philip Hedl return back to the lineup. I mean, look, this is a team that oddly enough is getting healthier as the playoffs go on.
Frank, before we wrap up, wanted to let everybody know that the Daily Faceoff Playoff Parlay Challenge is alive. Head to dailyfaceoff.com, hit the games tab up at the top, and make your picks. We have daily winners that are getting $25 Amazon gift cards, $40 Nation Gear gift cards as well, and the round 2 leaderboard is getting spicy. There's a $250 Amazon gift card on the line there. Head to dailyfaceoff.com, click on the games tab at the top. That is a wrap on another show from Vancouver. Should be a fascinating weekend of NHL hockey, and we will be back to break it all down on Monday at noon Eastern. Have a good weekend. We'll chat with you then.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.